Hello, world. It's Dr. Deborah Thompson here, and I have the great pleasure to be speaking with Dr. David Beck, who is a systems engineer in Washington, D.C. He's an entrepreneur, and he's passionate about all things tech. Thank you so much, Dr. Beck, for joining us.
Thank you, Dr. Bring me on board, Dr. Thompson. It's been a pleasure to be here today.
Oh, I've been looking forward to this conversation for a very long time. Ever since, well, the very first time I met you at a AAAS event, which is, for everybody else to know, AAAS is the American Association for the Advancement of Science. Really long phrase, but we just call it AAAS. And once I heard you speak, I was like, whoa, Dr. Beck is interesting. I need to learn more. And so we had a fantastic conversation a few weeks ago, and I'm like, we need to make sure more people know about your thoughts, your passions, and just be inspired, because I certainly have been inspired. So, well, let's get started. I introduced you as a systems engineer. What is that?
So the complexity of systems are around us every day, but just give you an example. I said earlier, your car is a system because you put your key in ignition, it turns the ignition and it goes to the engine, which turns the pistons to work, and then the transmission kicks in, then the starter starts everything up. That's a complex system. So a system is one or more individual products or mechanical devices or services that work together to make the whole complete and present you a purpose, whether it's a internet service or a satellite system or a vehicle or a product definition from a marketing standpoint, or in yourself a healthcare initiative or sustainability in the healthcare system to get people to create ecosystems of change by initiating systematic approaches.
I love that. I love that example of the car, because when you mentioned that, I thought of the pit in a race car circle, right? The cars stop all of a sudden, then a slew of people come and take off the tires, put them back on, like flip
exactly
and the other. It's magic over a course of 10 seconds, and then off it shoots.
Yeah, I think the average pit stop is like 60 seconds, less than a minute, 45 seconds, and they time themselves. They go through a systems approach to see. That's a good example because you have pit crew, one crew does another task, another person does a task mandated, and together the system works, right? You get the car ready, 4 new tires, make sure the tires are bolted in with the 5 bolts on the tire, and then the car is gone, back to work.
Yeah, and it's gone.
It is long gone. Mach 1 speed, right? Exactly.
Yeah, so the systems approach, man, there are so many different ways that my brain is spinning right now, honestly. I mean, you could extrapolate that to, of course, One Health and people from various backgrounds, but even within an office, right? One person is the point person for this, and then another person's a point person for that, and they work together. That's great.
Right, like right now in the background, you might hear the motorcycle. A motorcycle is the same way. It has 2 tires, an engine, a carburetor, combustor assembly, and the person who's driving it, they have 2 hands on to crank and start, which is a complete system of techniques to get the motorcycle to turn on and to go forward. So yeah, I agree with you. It's simplistic in a way. If you look at if you break down systems to a simpler approach, like a fire, you have gasoline, you put the match to the gas, and it starts the fire, combustion, right? Spontaneous combustion, which is a system as well. Because without the match, without the fire, the fire wouldn't be without the match and the gasoline. It would not happen at all.
Right. And then just thinking about the technology that goes into getting that fire started.
Exactly. The chemical processes, right? That happen on the minute level. Chemicals changing, bonding, unbonding, things of that nature. It's a very, very amazing nature forming task that happens in our body. I mean, our bodies are systems. That's the thing about systems. Our body is one system. I mean, without your lungs or your heart or your or your kidneys or your intestines or your stomach, you would not be able to function on a daily basis.
Yeah, it's so true. And clinicians, particularly things like people like family practice clinicians and veterinarians, you know, we have to see the whole system if we're not
Yep.
being subspecialists, right?
Yeah,
But at the
exactly.
same time, you know, I feel like the human brain, we are predisposed to compartmentalizing,
We
right?
do. Yeah, because we have the left and right hemisphere. It's amazing. There are studies have been done over a period of centuries that, we used to use I think we use our right more than our left or our left more than our right. I can't get it right? Because we're thinking, right? We're thinking with one side and we're analyzing with the other side. But we use the one side of the brain more than the other. And that's why they say left-handed people tend to use this side of the brain. Right-handed people tend to use this side of the brain. But most people, if you do a study, are right-handed. They're not, I forget what's called, the word terminology used for that, when you're left-handed, but happen something. I can't remember. It's hard to remember all these words all the time. But the people use their left hand more often because we don't normally use the left hand in our society a lot. There's tap areas of the brain here that are not necessarily function on a normal basis. They have opportunity, they have the skill set and the mentality or the thought patterns to do more complex organization of skills like more higher function mathematics skills and things of that nature because of using that left hand. I use both hands. I actually started out my left hand, and then this girl in class, second grade, was writing with her right hand, so I started writing with my right hand.
To impress her?
Yes.
Love it.
Yeah.
It's such a talent to
True
be
story.
ambidextrous. Oh my gosh. I mean, if you're a surgeon and you're ambidextrous,
That's what I am. Ambidextrous. I keep
yeah.
messing that word up.
Yeah. I mean, for both hands, right? And to be doing surgery with the equal skill and, oh my gosh, such a talent.
Yeah. I always mess that word up all the time. Ambidextrous. So I was like, can't get it. It's on the tip of my tongue. Can't get it out.
Yeah.
But it just shows how evolved as a person you are. I mean, you just showed an example right there. You did the same thing. So it just shows that science and technology are like the left and right side of your brain, right? Some people think they're separate, but they obviously work together in co-efficiency to make things happen.
And I'm curious, when I talk to some people, they're like, well, engineers are not scientists, scientists are not engineers.
I don't know why they say that. I mean, if you're an engineer, you are a scientist. Because first of all, there's over 100 different disciplines of engineering. I started out as an engineer, worked in design. So I would do design different cars, design different chemical processes for the plant I worked in as a chemical/product engineer. In the automotive sector, I designed completely parts. I had a design team that worked with me. Then we did testing, we did measurements, and then we designed for manufacturing to build the parts and then put them to good use on the vehicles or in the production environment to build other components or make other components for the complete assemblies, which were, again, systems. So that is a scientist, right? Because you're doing everything a scientist does. You create an idea, you're proving it out, and you're doing quantifiable research or development to make it a reality. So it's basically a scientist, but not the quote unquote scientific in the lab you see on a movie that people envision.
Yeah, I totally hear you on that because same thing goes with, clinicians, medical clinicians of any kind. Yeah, sure, we're scientists because number one, we can do research, but also we have to read scientific journals all the time. And then we have to extrapolate that information and help our patients, right?
That you're extrapolating data to use from the studies in the medical journals to try in the real world settings to make sure that, depends on the factors in which you use them, the quantifiable data sets to see if they work completely in your practice. I mean, you're doing experimentation, but you're doing it in a more reliable, data-driven way. And that's the thing about engineering. Engineering drives the data sets because without the creativity from the data sets and the engineering to build the data sets, you cannot prove a theory out because you can go all day long trying to build something to a specification in your mind, but there's no data to quantifiably say that this is a structural correctness of way something should be built, or in the data sets from doing studies in the medical side that, based on the genetic backgrounds, the present status of the patient, the quantifiable concerns of health concerns when you use the data, that you can't get a favorable result in which you're trying to interpret by using the data.
And in that response, there were so many parts of engineering that you touched upon. I think that's incredible. I think that's incredible.
I would tell you, I was in a clubhouse room last night, and I said to me, and I always thought this, an engineer, it's not more like these movies you see on TV, but you think about it, you are in the forefront of everything because you see the creation, the design, the build, development, the implementation, and the results of your craft each and every day you open your eyes in the morning to get up to do about your normal daily task or to work in your specific field of study. You see it every day. If you just open your eyes and look around you, everything is engineered and everything is scientifically engineered. Whether it's a scientist who's trained by a university setting or it's a person who studied on their own at home to garner those skill sets by repeatability and just trying things out and learning and reading and exploring and just grabbing all the data they could to formulate ideas to create something more wonderful than was existed before.
Yep. I love it. I'm such a fan of people who take it upon themselves to learn, because then they can start to see the world in a whole new way that's not, cookie cutter.
Yeah. I mean, some people believe we live in a matrix, right? I mean, we are to a degree. If you look at things and the way things are repeated, and if you live long enough, you see the same thing happen at least once or twice, right? And just because humans we are victims of we're habitual beings. We do things over and over in certain ways. We walk the same way, write our handwriting the same way. Sometimes we speak the same sentences to different people, exact same way. I mean, just the way our brain functions, right? We try to make things as perfect as possible when we do it. And doing that is repeating the process over and over. But in the cookie cutter form you just mentioned, it's so many data options that's happened within that repeatability that makes it not the same. Like in robotics and AI, which the quantifiable data there pushes the robot to do something specific on point every time, not to have any coercion or thought patterns that lean out, or mannerisms in humans when we think and we don't think, and we motion, we don't motion. We're not perfect beings. When artificial intelligence or robotics are task driven, completely on that task, and that's pretty much it.
Right. Well, okay, I have two burning questions right now. Why did you want to become an engineer?
That's the old task of why you become an engineer. I talked about this many times in the past. I think I was born an engineer. So this is the thing to me. And maybe some people feel that they had to go to college to be an engineer. But I talked to a young lady yesterday, and she said, as a child, she used to put things together, tear things apart. Guess what? I did the same thing. I had Tonka toys. I had little plastic and metal cars and stuff. I would take them apart and look at them and wonder what it was. I look at fire and try to figure out, why does fire, what gives fire its coloring? I mean, is it a chemical process? What makes certain things burn, certain things don't? What makes some things flexible, other things not? Why is plastic it's so available, but yet I can't find it anywhere in the forest when I used to go hunting when I was a kid because it's manufactured? Things like that make things curious about how things come to be. And then, as a child, you're being around other kids and seeing the way, interaction with other humans, you get to understand that there's got to be some kind of scientific unexplained thing that I did not know about in terms of what my schooling is at a very young age. That has to be out there for me to learn. And then you start reading, like I was a kid, we had world books, encyclopedias.
Me too.
I used to read the books all the time.
Me too.
Right? Yeah. So that was like, these guys come to your house and sell the word book encyclopedias, and you buy the whole set. And then you sit there and you read through the books and learn everything about science and technology and nature and horticulture and everything else. And I think that was my whole love. And then PBS, I love PBS growing up. I used to watch Kingdoms, Wild Kingdom, and, all these different shows that talked about, putting kids to learn more about science and technology and assembly and disassembly and the normal, ways the way functions are, different trades, like being an engineer versus a doctor, a lawyer, what do they do, how to do a bill, how bills were formed on Capitol Hill, stuff like that kind of intrigue you about, okay, this is an educational standpoint. I'm learning and I'm evolving. But most importantly, what made me understand I was an engineer was watching NASA and space shuttle program take off in the 70s. I used to sit and watch the TV and I said, Mom, I want to be an engineer. Didn't know I was already one, but here I am.
Love it.
27, 30 years, 40 years later, right?
Love it. And for the international audience, PBS is the public broadcasting, is it system?
Yes, public broadcasting system. Created in I think it was created in World War II. Initially, I think the PBS was created to show messages to the public during the war, and then they progressed to being a public service announcement, and then they decided to use it to educate and just provide free television services through congressional acts and funding for the public broadcasting system here in DC, and other organizations like the National Association of Broadcasters and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. They are nonprofits that are for-profit companies that provide services and funding for PBS to be on the air throughout the country, individual television stations under the PBS umbrella.
Yeah, it certainly has strongly affected my childhood.
Yes.
Sesame Street's on it, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Doctor Who.
Doctor Who.
Yeah, Tom Baker in the 70s. Hey, I'm old, so. He was Doctor Who from 1976, I think, to 1983 or 1972, 1983. He's Doctor Who. He was the longest running Doctor Who, was Tom Baker.
Wow. Yeah. I'm amazed those numbers, those dates. That's impressive.
I know I might not be completely right, but I know it was in the 70s to like the early 80s when they switched over to another guy. But the simple things, it's the simple things in life we remember. Remember those things. The volcanoes in third grade. You just put the stuff in the volcano and it explodes, and chemical reaction. Basic chemistry.
Yeah.
Chemistry.
And so it sounds to me like you knew you were going to be an engineer because you were an engineer as a child. As you said, you had that mindset as a child. And I remember reading a study a few years ago that said something like 80% of scientists, engineers, technologists, a whole gamut know that they want to go into their field by the age of 13.
Yeah, I knew when I was 5 years old, well, around 6, I knew I wanted to be an engineer. So it's just a matter of, getting my time to go. And honestly, it's funny. Of my class, I think I had 200 and something, maybe 300 people in my class. I'm probably only like 5 or 10 people are engineers. Most are teachers, educators, and work in the social services area. Because I guess back in the early 90s, that's something that was pushed a lot in schools.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm like, no, I want to be an engineer. So I started out as an engineer working in chemical, and then I got into automotive, and then did aerospace, and got into research and development, and came into government space. And here we are, many, many moons later.
Yeah, many moons later, exactly.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing is, as long as you can explain, as long as you can communicate efficiently with anybody else, you're going to be an educator, right? You don't necessarily have to be in a more classroom to be seen as an educator of the public, right?
Well, this is the thing about science. If you love science and you were one of those people, that's what I saw in the audience that day. I was speaking with the ladies on stage. You love science. If you love science, it's not hard. If you embark on a career in science where you are trying to make a difference to make this world a better place. Now, some people don't, but majority of people, their whole mindset is about making the world a better place. They see from their own eyes as a kid, they see how the world and the usage of the world in a bad or good way has changed their lifestyles around them. They want to make it better. So they become scientists and engineers because they see a passion for them to have a place in that picture to fix what they see around them and make it a better world. And I think in doing so, guess what? You're educating yourself And then by presenting it to people, you're educating the public about what you do, how do you do it, and how what you do is so important to the ecosystem of survival on this planet and beyond.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned at the very start that the first time I heard you, it was when you were public speaking in front of, I don't know, 200 some people. And I was
A
like,
lot
wow.
of people, right?
Yeah, I mean, who's counting? But I'm like, okay, number one, this guy's fascinating. Number two, he's an excellent public speaker. So how can we collective scientists of any different background improve our science communication skills so that way we can make this world a better place by talking outside of our bubbles? Do you have
So
any
I got some really good tidbits on that. The first class I took was, guess what? Dale Carnegie. I took Dale Carnegie when I was 24 years old. I think 26 years old. And I took Dale Carnegie class because they offered as a curriculum for engineers to learn how to speak, right? Because you're presenting meetings, you don't know, scientific ways, how formulas are induced, but you cannot give people eye-to-eye contact. You don't know how to, present to your audience, observe your audience, understand the audience that you're speaking to, so you can change the way you speak and the dynamics the way you speak, so that they can engulf the knowledge that you're speaking upon. So I took Dale Carnegie. Then I took it again, took several classes in Dale Carnegie. And then I came back, a Dale Carnegie grad assistant. So when you take a Dale Carnegie class, you graduate, you become a grad assistant with Dale Carnegie. And then from there, when you're a grad assistant, they actually get up there and you actually run the class.
Nice.
And the thing about Dale Carnegie is so cool. You take people from medical background, science background, any background. Guess what? You put them in a situation where they don't feel like, okay, I don't feel comfortable. Guess what? That's how you learn, in an uncomfortable situation. So you can't make up stories. You can't make up a speech. You can't present based on something you've done before that works. You have to ad-lib. You have to learn how the complexities of speech have to be catered to your audience. So there's one amazing thing that Dale Carnegie taught me. It was about how to learn the 13 colonies. They said, you envision the 13 colonies based on fruit or desserts or a specific food from that state, or what is known as, like Philly cheesesteaks, and then you stack them up. Then you remember the order of how the states were formed into the Union from the first to the 13 colonies by that food or that demographic area that most happily gives you an opportunity to learn or listen or have a mental creative thought of that state. And then you stack it up. And then think about that. Then you take that to people. So if I meet you, I know for a fact that you love animals, right? So I know if I forget your name, I say, well, her name is, oh yeah, Deborah, or something like that, right? It gets you to think about who the person is, right? Because you're trying to figure out the name associated with a specific task or a specific field of study. And it's kind of funny. The professor in the class said, it's like a big old cake, and you put different frostings, different flavors on it, strawberries, whatever. However way you envision it is the way you gain your brain to understand complexities of how to put different things together. And then once you get to a system in your brain, it's easy. And to this day, guess what? I'm bad with names, but I'm good with faces, because I never learned the way I should have. I guess my brain said, no, I can't. Dave, forget it. You can't. It's too much. Got too much in your head, right? I should have probably used my left hand. I probably would have gained that knowledge better than using my right. But it's a good thing. And then I took Kepler Trago, which is sales training, how to sell yourself. Because guess what? Every time you speak to people, you have to sell yourself, right? It's not about selling a specific product or service. Before you sell a product or service, you got to sell your customer. Do they want to sit and listen to me blab my mouth and say, yada, 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 yada? Do they feel that I'm important to take time out of their schedule to listen to what I have to say? Do I keep their attention? Can I captivate them with my speech? And do I involve them in the process where they feel, oh yeah, I can understand what that guy's talking about. Went through the exact same thing. And that's what Kepler Trago taught me. And then just being around different formats where you have to present Microsoft PowerPoint presentations to people you do not know anything about. gauging their understanding, slowing down your speech, speeding up your speech, and maybe raising hey or lowering your tone based on the audience you're speaking to.
Right, right, exactly. And sometimes at the end of the sentences, say for instance, when I was up in Canada, I was always raising my voice at the end of sentences because that's what everybody did. And then when I came back down to the United States, because I pop, I've lived in both places.
Yeah.
People say, "Oh, where are you from?" Like they pick up on it, even though it's something that you don't necessarily notice, your audience does.
And it's funny though, it's a study of linguistics behind that, technology and science behind how to speak. They had speech pathologists all the time talk about how people speak, how they pronounce words, how well they put words together, the way they rest between sentences and words and verbal structures actually helps their audience or just denies their audience the opportunity to learn and feel they're part of the discussion, correct? So you hear professors, they slow it down, they stop, they start back so that people can mentally catch what they're saying. These guys know what they're talking about, right? Or a CEO on stage in the New York Stock Exchange or on a CNN broadcast talking, because they want people to engage in what they're saying and also learn from what they're saying. So it's a technique you have to teach yourself. It just takes time to, I tell people sometimes, look in the mirror and talk in the mirror. If you can understand, you feel comfortable talking in the mirror, people feel comfortable listening to you talk.
Yes, I like that a lot. I also have heard, and I try to practice it, is when I prepare a speech, I try to record myself and then give it a few minutes, and then I look at it and I analyze it as if it's a different person.
Yep.
So I am pretty hard. I'm pretty rough.
I think we all are. It's not an easy task. Speech is not, because the English language is made up of 5 or more different languages. I mean, we're kind of like I can't say the word on here because it's, but we're a language of multiple facets. Yeah. And we're not an easy language to learn. People think English is easy to learn. No, it's the hardest language to learn in the world almost. So, and I think Portuguese is hard, but English is harder for most people.
It's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
Yes, it's true. Wow, we've covered so many things. I mean, from the start of what's a systems engineer, we got to cars, mm-hmm. We got to eventually we got to communication. We touched upon childhood and how it's important to really involve and inspire children and get them, in the mindset of what an engineer, a scientist, a clinician. I would say, and please let me know what your thoughts are. I would say
sure.
Everybody has in common is that we're curious.
Yes, I mean, all kids are. I mean, there's studies that say the kids know more about what we are as humans before they learn how to speak language. I mean, they talk to each other in their own language, right?
Oh, yeah.
There used to be the movies back in the 80s and 90s called Look Who's Talking, right? I think Tom Hanks was in one of them. I can't remember who the actor was. I'm just saying Tom Hanks. I'm not giving him a shout out. John Travolta. I mix up actors. I'm getting old. Yeah. Church in my age. But it looks who's talking. And it's scientific studies on that, because kids they retain everything from their parents, right? The DNA. That DNA is a system. I mean, they retain everything, and they regurgitate, well, might not be the right word, but they express those words, those feelings, those emotions, those mannerisms every day when you watch your child. My daughter did the same thing with me when I was a kid. I saw an image of me and a little girl as a baby, and I'm like, wow, that's me. That's how I am. Maybe I need to slow down a little bit. I'm just joking. But she was such an amazing, nurturing, loving child, because I was like that. And I'm glad I was. I wasn't the opposite, but she was a really good child. She was not a bad child. She was sweet. She would sit and listen to me talk to her, nod her hand, grab my arm and rub her arm against my hand, because I did my mom like that. And she would listen to me. And it was just amazing to see that from me, that I did do something right in my life to be that kind of person, so that my child can pick those great attributes from me.
Yeah.
But yes, children are very open to learn, very curious. I think in teaching them more about science, we need to give them just opportunities to learn. Just throw things in front of them that's scientific, have little toys, little mannerisms they can learn. Don't talk the baby talk with them. Talk like you're talking to me now. And that's what I did with my daughter. I just said, hey, I talked to her about boys and school and going to college. And to this day, she tells me as a second semester college freshman at 18, just turned 18 4 months ago, Dad, all you talked about was college all the time. I said, yeah, because, I wanted you to get the understanding that it wasn't easy for me to go to college, but definitely it's easy for you because you're much more intelligent and much more opportunities for you to learn than I had.
Yeah. Yeah. And, regardless of somebody's background, is perseverance from all the stories. And I mean, my personal story is perseverance, right? And knowing what you want.
And that was a perfect name for the last mission, NASA on the Mars, perseverance, because that is the utmost word that displays every ounce of sacrifice the human race has for exploring science and being part of the universe. Perseverance.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your vast experience, both as a father, as an engineer, as an entrepreneur, as a public speaker, you've had so many opportunities to speak with young leaders. And you have an opportunity right now to speak with young leaders who are watching this. And do you have any final words of advice, words of wisdom? We spoke about how One Health is, the systems approach, right? How can we move forward? Because there are more people of power starting to appreciate the systems approach, but how can we get that momentum and keep it running?
I think create opportunities for kids to be working together across functional levels, encourage systems thinking. When a child brings something to a parent's hand, give them an opportunity to think about it, but also give them the tools to think about it so that they can learn how to think in a systems approach. Create opportunities in the schools for not just having 5 or 6 different basic learning skill sets, but have a systems class and necessary engineering, a class where they can sit and learn and put those 5 or 6 different skill sets together and learn how to work together as humans. So that when they get into older schools where kids are learning or graduate to another level, they already understand how to approach their classmates, how to involve their classmates, and how to challenge their classmates to think outside of the norm and be people who can grow up in a world that can change it for the better. I think we have to give them the tools. It's our job to do that, everybody's job to do that, and that's what we need to do. It's just important to do that because kids get bored quickly. They like to learn. I was like that. I love to learn. And when you don't get anything and you don't learn anything, you get bored. And that's what happens in the education system. When you get bored, the kids don't want to learn and they don't do their grades, don't do their grades fail. The grades don't recommend. It doesn't reflect what they genuinely are inside because of the systems we have in place right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So we as, professionals or brand new professionals, young leaders, whoever you are out there, think about how you can give back to your community, how you can inspire the next generation after you with how to start having a systems thinking approach. And from there, the future will be much brighter. Thank you so much, Dr. Beck, for your time. I knew this was going to be a lot of fun. We covered so many things and it was such a pleasure.
Let's do another one. And by the way, I'm impressed by you. You're my mentor. I'm your mentor because I've learned from you just as much as you learn from me. And if we take that approach with people, we can always make an evident and a sacrifice to make this world a better place, one person at a time.
No, we rise together, right?
That's right. Rise together.
Onwards and upwards. Love it. Well, Dr. Beck, it's a pleasure. Take care.
Bye. Have a good day.